Hi everybody, my name is Michael, and welcome to my platformer movement tutorial series where we're going to be building a character like Marlowe here with the ability to jump up and through platforms, move and run, and of course all the little details that go into creating something just like this. In this first video, we're really just going to cover setting up a project for the first time, and so if you're looking to build a platformer, then you've found the right place. Hey, Michael here. Throw on your favorite game dev tunes and join me as we build a 2D platformer in Godot 4 using GD script. All right, hey guys, welcome. So my name is Michael, and if you haven't seen any of my videos before, I like to go pretty in-depth and just show you how I'm building these projects from start to finish. And this series that I'm doing right now with this basic platformer movement is going to be a limited small series in scope, and then in the future, if there's a desire and a need, I'll add additional features onto this style of game. And so what I want to do here first is I just want to step any newcomers through how to create their project in Godot. And if you know how to do all this stuff, then you can just go ahead and skip on to the next video, I suppose. You might miss a few basic things like grabbing the asset pack from my itch.io page and adding that to your project. So again, if you're experienced, you can probably do that on your own. Find that link in the description for that asset pack. And otherwise, if you're here to learn those things, then put on some of your favorite music like I do, and let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to launch Godot 4.4. And what you're going to see here is you're going to have your project library, and yours might be full like mine, or it might be empty. Okay, and so what you can do is you just go ahead and say create. We're going to create a new project, and I'm not going to go into detail about what I name this one because I'm going to jump over to one that I've already set up, but let's just call it, you could call it platformer, you could call it new game, call it whatever you want. In fact, I might just leave mine as new game project right now. By default, it wants to create a folder, and then you can change where you want that folder to be created. And then just pick the renderer. It should hopefully automatically select the renderer that suits your system the best, but forward plus is the standard one. So hopefully you can run that. If not, then maybe compatibility. And if you are using version control like I am, then Git is the standard, and it'll kind of set up just a nice little metadata file that it'll tell GitHub which files to keep, which ones to ignore, things like that. Okay. And obviously edit now, just as if you want to open the project now. And if you uncheck that, then it will just create the project and leave it as is. So I'm going to go ahead and say create. And once Godot loads up, we'll have our project. Now, one fun fact about Godot is that the Godot engine is actually technically a Godot game built in the Godot engine, which is kind of funny. But here we go. We've got a project. Now, the two things that we want to cover as we get started before we bring any assets in are our project settings, and we'll set up our basic input mapping so that we kind of have basic support for keyboard or a controller or whatever kind of input you're using, okay? So step one is let's go ahead and just go to project settings, and I have advanced settings turned on. You can have it off if you want, but in here you're going to see things like the name of your project, the icon for your project, which I like to set a custom icon. That way when I'm showing it in the, when I launch Godot for the first time, I can see an icon for each project. Makes it easier to find them. We are going to need some advanced settings for a few of the things, but you can just set up kind of like the name of your project here. And I'm going to go ahead and click down here under display on window. And what I want to configure first are just how I'm going to size the viewport for my game. And what you do here might vary a little bit, but you can see that the viewport width is just kind of got an arbitrary size picked. And what I want is I want to match an old school retro pixel art feel. And so I'm going to set my viewport width to 320 pixels wide and the height to 180 pixels tall. So that way it's like a low resolution screen, right? Now, if you turn on the advanced settings, we're going to have a few other options here that we're going to want to use. And in particular, there's a window width override and a height override. And these are going to be important. We'll come back to these maybe because obviously 320 pixels by 180 pixels is like going to be teensy tiny on whatever screen you're on. So we'll come to that. And then there's also a stretch mode. And by default, we're going to go ahead and use canvas items for this. You could also use viewport. If you're really going for technically pixel perfect pixel art, then viewport is the way to go. Canvas items is also good for 2D games. The difference is the pixels can use subpixel spacing, whereas viewport, it cannot. And I don't really want to get into too many of the details about that. I'm going to pick canvas items, just a little bit smoother with that setting on. So I'm going to go ahead and say close. So now that we've got that set up, before we can run this, let's create a 2D scene. Okay. And just for the sake of being able to test this, I'm going to drag in my icon just like that. And I'm going to go ahead and hit F5, and it's going to say here there's no scene been defined. So we can select the current scene as our like default scene in the game, which hasn't been saved yet. So it's going to ask me to save it, and I'll just call it scene for now because we're going to get rid of this. Okay, there we go. pretty awesome, right? So that's the resolution we chose, 320 by, what is it, 180. Now you can see if I make this full screen, it's not doing a whole lot. I can choose to have it scale up, okay? But what we're going to do is let's go back into our project settings. And with these advanced options on, there's a window width override and a window height override. And you can just set this to whatever you want. It's going to be the resolution that it runs at. It's going to scale it up to that. I'm going to pick a resolution. One thing you could do is you could say like 320, and then you could multiply it by 3 or something like that, right? Or multiply it by 4. And actually, that's a pretty good idea. So I'm going to just do that in 180 by 4. Okay, so it's going to be 4 times the size. So you'll recognize that resolution if you're an old school nerd like me. I'm going to go ahead and close this. So now when we run the project, you can see that it's going to, oops, here we go. If I unmaximize it, it's now going to scale up that window to the size that I selected. All right. So hopefully you got to that point without any issues. And now you've got kind of your basic resolution set up. I'm going to go ahead and close that. Okay, so there's one other thing I want to do here that's going to really affect the style of this game. Now, this particular setting, again, in project settings, is one that's going to dictate how our textures look and are rendered when we bring them into our game, at least the default that they are. And so if we go down, in fact, I can turn off advanced settings for this one, I believe. If I look down under rendering, there's a textures section, and you can see the default texture filter is linear, which means it's going to try and smooth the textures to some degree. So if you scale them up, it'll smooth them, but we don't really want that for pixel art. That's how you end up with the blurry looking pixel art. And I'll demo that here in just a second when we bring our assets in, but I'm going to choose nearest, okay? Because that will give us kind of the nice crisp pixel art style edges that we want. And you can already see a difference. You see how this, as I zoom into this Godot icon, you can see the pixels and they're not getting smooth, okay? And if I run the project, again, not getting smooth. Whereas before we had that setting, they were. And one thing you can do to kind of test that, if I select the icon and I come down over here to the texture, I can actually change the filter. Right now it's inheriting the setting in the project that I've set, but I could change this back to linear, and you see how that got blurry, the pixels got blurry, and then back to nearest. So there you go. And then there's some other options here that we don't need to get into, but really we just want nearest. MIP mapping is important if you're doing 3D games, because you've got, you know, multiple detail levels of the texture maybe, and we don't really need that with the type of game we're making, or pretty much any 2D game that I'm aware of would use MIP mapping. But there we go. So nearest is what we want. Or actually, we could just leave this as inherit, right? Because nearest is what we set our project to. The next thing I want to do here is I want to bring in the assets for this project. And so what you can do is look again at the description below and find the link to my itch.io page for this project. And I'll go ahead and pull that up. Okay, so this might look a little bit different by the time you visit the page because the project may have grown, but what you're going to be looking for is the platformer movement asset pack. And you can just click to download it. You don't need to make a donation. That's there because I know people like to support me, and there's a lot of ways to support me, but a donation on itch.io is always welcome. But otherwise, just go ahead and say, no thanks, take me to the downloads and download that zip file. Now, once you've got that file downloaded, let's go ahead and open the file. And then we're also going to open our project folder. So I'll show you how to open the project folder pretty easily. If you go to your root here where it says RES, it's your resource folder for your project, and right click, there's an option to open in File Manager. The verbiage may be a little bit different depending on the platform you're on, and mine opened on a different screen. There we go. Okay, so here we go. Here's my project folder. Now I need to find my download of that zip file. So go ahead and find yours. I'll open mine. Okay, so here it is, the asset pack for the platformer movement. I'm going to go ahead and open that. And what you can do is just select all of these and copy them or drag and drop them right into the root folder of your game project, just like that. So now you're going to have a player folder and an assets folder. And if we look at these, the player folder has some folders that we're going to use. It has an audio folder with a jump and a skid wave file. It's got a script folder with a state machine folder and states, and these are all empty, but this is just the folder structure that we're going to use. So I kind of front loaded some of that work for you. And then we've got a sprites folder, which does contain a little icon that we'll use as an example in the game, as well as our little hero Marlowe. Let's open up Marlowe. Say hello, Marlowe. You know, purely inspired by my own imagination. Marlowe is this, I don't know, he's like an electrician from Chicago maybe, and loves Subway sandwiches. I don't know. Obviously, this is a play off of another popular character, but there we go. So there's your sprite sheet. This is a really simple sprite sheet with only a few frames of animation, and it does kind of match and mimic some of the old retro style games that were made back when I was a child. So you should have those. And then in addition, within these folders, there's an assets folder that has a tile set folder. And in here, you're going to find a few visual assets that we're going to use to create the levels and the simple world that we're going to use to jump around. And once you've extracted these files into your project folder like this, right, then if you go back to Godot, it'll take a moment to load those. And now you'll see those in your project, and you'll have these tile sets in here. Let's go ahead and just for fun, let's drag a cloud out. Boink. And I'm going to go ahead and delete my Godot icon because I don't really want that. Now this cloud, I just want to demonstrate this again because this is nice pixel art. And let's do this with the player as well. Let's come down here and let's get our player sprite. Boink. Okay. These items, they look pretty good, crisp pixel art. But if we were to select them both and go into our texture setting and turn the filter back to linear, which was the default, then you can see how blurry they are. And some of you may want that as an effect, or if you're doing a game with high resolution artwork, then you might want linear filtering for that as well. Otherwise, back to inherit, which gives us our nearest. And if we run the project, now we can see these items placed in the scene. Pretty simple, right? So for those of you who are new to Godot, this scene tree is kind of how we lay things out in our scene. You can think of a scene as either a level or simply a collection of nodes that has some specific functionality. So as an example, in the future video, when we create our player, he will be a scene called player and have all the stuff built in to make the player work. And all my devices are beeping at me. So once we've made it this far, there's one last thing I want to do for this video, and then you guys can move on to the next one. Okay, so that last bit that we're going to work on is going to be to just set up our project input. So I'm going to go to project settings. One last thing that we want to set up, input mapping. And what the input map settings are is it's a way for us to control what inputs we want to use, but assign them a unique name that's easily recognizable as we're coding our project. And so you'll see what I mean as we get started here, but we're going to go ahead and create an input map for the basic actions that we would have for this Super Marlowe dude, okay? We're going to have movement buttons, left, right, and maybe like up and down. At least to crouch, we want it down. So we'll do that, left, right, up and down. And then we'll have a jump and a run button or an action button. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say, let's see, add new action. You just type in the action name here. So you can say left, and then you can click add. And then what you see here is we have that left action. Let's go ahead and add right, up, down. What did I say? We have a jump action and an action. Maybe too redundant, but there we go. Now these don't do anything by themselves. What you need is you need to come next to each action and add an event. And it's going to just say, well, what event do you want to bind to this action? And what you can do is if you're on a keyboard or if you have a gamepad, you can actually just push a key and you can see that it's automatically detecting what I press. So for left, I could just say, yeah, let's use the left action. And I'm going to say, okay. Same with right. We'll just push right, up, oops, click the plus, down, and that's pretty straightforward. And what I'm going to do for the jump is I'm going to add two keys, X and spacebar. And then for the action, I'm going to do the same thing. It's going to be Z and left shift. Two ways to access those. If you had a gamepad, you could do the same thing. You can even go in here and manually assign. If you see there's joypad buttons and you can pick a button, all right? And the buttons are nicely labeled. They say, you know, the joypad button 1, right action, Sony's circle, the B on the Xbox, or A on a Nintendo controller. So it's laid out in a pretty nice manner, but obviously, you know, if you're like me and you keep your favorite controller plugged into your PC, you could just use that. Okay. And so I'll just give you an example here. What did I click on? We're binding to, I don't even know. Let me see. Let's go back to left. Yeah, there we go. You can see I'm pressing D-pad left, right, up, down. You could push X, right? I'm not going to go ahead and bind those right now. That'll be an exercise that you can complete. Set it up how you want for your game. All right, so that's part 1 of this series. The next video should be available as soon as you watch this one. So go ahead and jump over to that, where we're going to set up the tile map for our little level and just kind of set that up and get that going. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. It helps me grow. Maybe give this video a thumbs up if you felt that the content was useful, and drop a comment below and join the conversation. And as always, we'll see you next time.